Hello and welcome to episode number 347. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you for listening in. Before we start, I wanted to mention that we are a listener-supported podcast, so if you enjoy our interviews, then please visit pm-podcast.com/premium. Your subscription will help keep us going. And now on to our topic, which is every project leader needs a project plan. Our interview is based on Ron Black's book Leadership, the Everyday Superheroes Action Guide to Plan and Deliver High-Stakes Projects. And yes, he does indeed call those like you and me who work in project leadership superheroes. And you'll hear why very early in the discussion. Ron has also given us 1 printed copy and 9 electronic versions of his book to give away. The print version and 4 ebooks, they are for our premium subscribers, and the other 5 ebooks, they are for everyone. So if you want to participate, then please go to facebook.com/pmpodcast and look for the book giveaway announcement. I'll repeat this again after the interview. And now put on your superhero cape and let's fly. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Ron Black, author and keynote speaker.
Hello, Ron. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
And hello, Cornelius. It's a delight to be here with you today.
Well, thank you for joining us here. In our interview, we are going to do a review of some of the main points from your book, Leadership, the Everyday Superheroes Action Guide to Plan and Deliver High-Stakes Projects. But before we get to that, would you please give us sort of the 10,000-foot high-level introduction to the book? What's it about and who did you write it for?
You know, Cornelius, it's clear to most of us who've been at this game of project management for any time at all that knowing the tools, the knowledge of project management methodologies is essential. And yet, when I go out into the field and I see projects going on, sometimes you see that projects don't always go as well as they could. And I think that oftentimes it's because there's perhaps a latent or a lack of leadership, if you will, in some cases, or a resistance to step up and speak up at times. So when I wrote this book, this is my 3rd book on project management, I really wanted to focus on how to use project management tools as tools of leadership to facilitate high levels of teamwork. So the 10,000-foot level is, this book is, dedicated to what I call everyday superheroes, people who lead projects, people who make tomorrow a better place by leading projects.
Yeah, and what's the story behind the cape, the superpowers, the superheroes? How did you come up with that?
Yeah, it's I admit it's a little strange, but then so am I. So right, but honestly, when I look back on my life and my business career and in general, many of us have found our leadership skills by admiring people and by learning from others, and I think that's the way I did as well. And when I track it all the way back to where I got the beginning of this attitude, this notion, it actually tracks back to the top of my neighbor's garden shed when I was 8 or 9 years old. And a buddy of mine, Johnny, we were flying around the neighborhood as kids will do with towels wrapped around our necks, and we were playing Superman, superheroes. Life is an adventure when you're 8 years old. And for most of us project managers, it still is, hence the parallel. So Johnny and I found ourselves on top of this garden shed with no apparent way of getting down. It's easier to climb up than climb down. And there we were stuck. And, it didn't take long and our mood soured. We were beginning to blame one another and, things were looking pretty grim. Ultimately, my buddy Johnny spontaneously gave us these few words of advice that honestly I cherish to this very day. He decided that there was one thing to do in this situation, and that was to take action. So he backed up to the edge of the garden shed roof, and he took as big, as fast a run as he could, and he leaped into the air. Now, look, I thought for sure this would be the end of my buddy. But as he went by me, his last words was, "Ronnie, trust your cape," as all superheroes must. And his youthful exuberance and, if you will, cavalier attitude, fortunately, his bones bent rather than broke. I expected to see this crumpled up kid on that side off the edge of the garden shed, but there he was. But by the time I went over and looked over the edge and saw him, he was standing there. And he had his, he looked like Superman. He had his feet widespread and his hands on his hips and his chest was stuck out and his chin was cocked over the side. He looked like a regular superhero, and I'm pretty sure he felt like one too. And there I was, still marooned. So there I was, And you got to ask yourself, whenever you're in a situation like that, oh my gosh, what could I do? I had to follow the guy. So I leapt off the roof. I survived the tumble as well, and we bounded on home. Now, this story did not stop. In fact, it has not stopped yet. 3 years or 10 years later, he and I found ourselves outside the gates of Marine Corps Recruit Depot, right? And the last words Johnny gave to me as we shuffled off the bus to get on our yellow footprints and enter the gates of you-know-what, Johnny whispered to me over the din of all the shuffling and the noise of us getting off that bus and this crowd of young men. And he said, "Ronnie, trust your cape." And that was the last thing Johnny said to me in 84 training days. And indeed, it has come back to me time and time again. He stood up with me at my marriage, at my wedding. Best man, my bride comes down the aisle. This bonehead standing next to me looks over in my ear and giggles out loud, "Ronnie, trust your cape." It's like, come on, Johnny, good grief. But honestly, this theme, this playful metaphor is kind of a universal truth, that when we are in a situation that requires leadership, it requires a choice, yes. And that's easy to analyze, and it's easy to do the numbers on the risk. But what it also requires, which is sometimes the most difficult part of it, in my opinion, is reaching deep down into our gut and being courageous and acting with courage, choosing to put ourselves at risk, be it real or unreal. It's perceived risk, and sometimes it's very real risk in our business. So trust your cape is this metaphor, the theme of the book, and I try to relate to it and to the audiences I work with, the teams I work with, this playful metaphor that, kind of speaks a universal truth. So that's the story behind Trust Your Cape. Honestly, like all good adventures, the story's not over yet, right? Every project I get into, it seems like there's an opportunity to trust my cape.
Exactly. All right. So what we want to do for the remainder of the interview here is we want to open up your book, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Everyday Superpowers is Chapter 1, and Chapter 2 is Even Superheroes Need a Plan. And at the end of each chapter, you kind of summarize it into superpower points. And I'm simply going to read all these points out to you, and you can tell us what you mean with that. All right. So Chapter 1, Everyday Superpowers. And your first super point there is, sooner or later, every challenging project, initiative, or team assignment requires leadership.
I, for one, have never seen a perfect project, nor do I expect to see a perfect one. Something always happens. We never really can see the future as clearly as we'd like to. And so there usually is a crux in every project or every initiative. And sooner or later, somebody has to make a hard choice, a hard decision. Somebody has to choose to stand up and speak up, or speak truth to power, or sometimes push back to sponsors or stakeholders. So those times, project management is not just a science. It's a skill. And there's emotional energy that goes into it. So my notion is that sooner or later, all of us will have to make a choice that's probably not easy, pushes us out of our comfort zone a little. Hence, leadership is required.
The second superpower point is the fact that leadership isn't a title, position, or job description. Leadership is the choice to transform intentions into action. Tell us about that one.
I think we all have our own notions, and rightfully so, of what leadership is. And to define it, when you ask people what leadership is, you'll get a variety of answers. It's kind of like trying to define other important things like hope or charity or love or liberty. So what is leadership? And for me, it boils down to the courage to choose to act, to take action when many won't or others don't. to be the first to stand up and to speak up. So in my mind, choosing to move forward purposefully towards the results is what I use as my working definition of leaders.
Yeah, and that dovetails nicely into the third superpower point that you have here. And it goes like this. Everyday superheroes help others realize that they are more capable and resilient than they might otherwise believe. So this is not inward looking, this is outward looking, right?
Very much so. And this is one of those situations where the more we give, the more is reflected back to us. And when I think through my career and through my life, the key points in it and the real changes in my career and life, I see these critical moments where there was somebody in my world who literally cared about me enough to take the risk to task me or to challenge me or to ask me or to help shift my paradigm of where I was standing. So I think it's the greatest gift that I've ever been given was a challenge, a thoughtful, warm-hearted challenge by a colleague, a friend, a counselor, a manager, a peer, a subordinate. We get led from all points of the compass. It's the greatest gift that we can give or get, in my opinion.
And the fourth and final superpower point that we have in Chapter 1 is the leader's everyday superpowers include clarity, action, purpose, and enthusiasm. Let's take a look at these four, maybe one by one briefly here. So the leader's everyday superpowers, clarity.
Whenever you bring people together, we've all got a point of view and we've all got our paradigms. We all have our own lens of reality. That's the way it is. And I think good leaders are able to help others see the world in a unified way. Not necessarily my opinion or your opinion, but what can we agree on? What do we agree on? So this whole clarity thing, this whole clarity notion, I think is the first rule of leadership. I think it's the first rule of project leadership as well. So clarity, if you look at the data, 70% of projects that fail have in common communication problems. And that runs the gamut of control and communication, but communication is a huge issue. The data shows it and our experience shows it. So clarity is key. But if you got to put these words together, and you can put them together in any fashion you want to, think about clarity of purpose. Put those two words together. And a project team that knows the purpose is a project team that knows the why. And when we help people understand the why we're doing something, it's very engaging. That helps us build the, if you will, enthusiasm around what needs to be done. So you can put purpose with enthusiasm and action with purpose and clarity with, you can mix and match these words. And to me, they just resonate. So clarity of purpose, enthusiastic action are the way I most frequently approach this situation. And, to the astute, you'll notice that the acronym spells CAPE, and hence
I hadn't realized that.
my mantra, trust your CAPE, right? Johnny's mantra.
Clarity, action, purpose, enthusiasm. CAPE. Yes, of course. Makes sense.
And it's a simple way of remembering when it gets crazy outside and you're standing up there on top of that roof all alone wondering what to do, sometimes it helps to remember to focus on clarity of purpose and take the enthusiastic action that is necessary to get to where we need to get to.
All right. Those were the 4 superpower points from Chapter 1 in your book, Everyday Superpowers. Now we're moving on to Chapter 2. We have about twice as many here. And this chapter is titled, Even Superheroes Need a Plan. And the first superpower point is, even superheroes do better with a plan.
Yes. I kind of chuckle at myself. It takes a little bit of hubris, if you will, a lack of humility to jump into some of the projects we jump into and think that we can accomplish them. My goodness, it's a little bit of cavalier attitude actually helps the world move forward. So I playfully poke fun at myself and at my colleagues who, we think we can solve the world's problems or at least put a dent in them with our projects. So, we have that kind of a superhero self-esteem, if you will. But I also try to rein in my enthusiasm and remind myself that, hey, you don't know all there is to need to know about this project. So if I will take the time to plan, I will be more likely to succeed. And
Yeah,
so
I know exactly what you're talking about here, because when I'm given a new project, it's so exciting, it's so new, you want to get going. You see so many things that can be accomplished and can be done, and then you have to sit back and plan this whole thing out.
yeah, there's a time
Instead of going.
it's the cool our jets time. I got to just chill for a moment and take a breath, look around us, and create a legitimate plan.
Mm-hmm. But then the second superpower point is here, and that really puts it into perspective for me. When you choose to plan, you choose to lead.
I think that is the perspective of the entire book, short and sweet. If we plan with mastery, I believe that we don't just go through the motion of filling out the forms, filling out the checklists. You see so much of this going on in our industry. And it's not about the forms and the checklist. It's about asking the right questions, engaging our colleagues' minds and their emotional energies in an effective way to rally their wisdom, to harvest their skills and bring them together. So I think it really is core to the entire purpose of the book to take what is a very serious subject, professional, personal, organizational success, and in this playful way of the superhero adventure, bring it into focus of what's important, and let's make sure that we focus on it.
When you choose to plan, you choose to lead, very similar to if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's very much in a similar vein here, right?
Well, it is. And I think if we take it one, it is you hear it all the time, right? But it's not just a trite saying, because when we fail to plan, we'll probably fail, because when we fail to plan, we fail to do the three most important things that a leader does with a team. And first of all, we ask. And secondly, we listen. And thirdly, we learn. So if we fail to plan, we are literally failing to ask. We're making the assumption that we know everything there is to know. And that even a guy like me is willing to not fess up to, And we have so much talent around us. Everybody has something to contribute. So why not learn? Why not learn together from one another? And that absolutely is essential and possible only if we listen to one another. So I really do think that those core skill sets in a leader's arsenal are the ability to ask and to listen, that basic, fundamental, mutual respect, trust, and rapport thing that we have with each one another, and then to learn from one another.
The third superpower point that you have in this chapter, I think many of our listeners can relate to. It is projects and team assignments are becoming an ever larger portion of the average professional's work. Tell us where that comes from.
Yeah, I'll go one better on it. I think that every professional needs to have project management skills. And I believe it's becoming an ever larger portion of our daily work, because organizations are, there's always every organizational trust methodology, every command and control mechanism. No matter how we organize ourselves in an organization, they all have some pluses and some minuses. But project management is the one that cuts through departmental and role-playing and all the other methodologies. It cuts through that, and it organizes people around the work. So we put work front and center and say, okay, what do we need to get this done? And then we organize ourselves in a fashion so that it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the loading dock clerk. We organize ourselves around required skills to achieve the results that we want to achieve. And I think that as long as we are living in a world that continues to be turbulent with change and accelerating complexity and the high levels of competition that we all face every day in all of our industries, then projects will become an ever increasingly important part of our skills, because that is how we do things that are new. That's how we organize ourselves around new work.
And I assume this is also why so many project managers say that, that this happened accidentally. I did not want to become or plan to become a project manager. I was just suddenly handed a project.
I think that's true. And I think it's also okay for you and I, that is our inner circle, okay, to admit we do not know what we're doing. Every project that comes to us is literally new. Now, you can't say that to your boss, right? But I think we need to at least admit to ourselves that in challenging projects, we're likely in over our heads.
All right. The fourth superpower point, short duration. Cross-functional teams with few or no dedicated resources and no clear lines of authority and responsibility are increasingly the norm. It's unfortunate. But how come this is a superpower point?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge it. So, we used to, I'm on the old end of the working scale here, okay? So I look back over my 30 years experience and I see that the world has shifted beneath my feet, that we used to actually believe that the manager knew more than we did, that the boss knew more than the worker. But that has turned completely upside down. Now people are hired because of their specific skill sets. And the boss, well, hopefully they hire right, okay? But the boss doesn't know it all. The boss has got to rely on the experts. So we've got to bring all these experts together in this complex technology world that we live in. And it's not just IT that's technological. You take any industry these days, and when you burrow into it, you'll see how sophisticated and how complex it is. Even the simplest apparent from the outside look of industries has become very complex. So multiple experts are needed. And when you've got that, what do you have? You've got no clear lines of authority, no clear lines of control. We've got to bring a herd of experts together and get them to work in some high-performance manner.
When I talk to colleagues and junior project managers, people who have basically just fallen into this, they tell me, I have this project, just been assigned to it, but I have no budget, I have no authority, I can't hire the right people, and still they expect me to perform. Doesn't that really show how little regard companies have for us project managers and project leaders, and also the need to have sound project management and project leadership experience?
I think it does. And it also shows the hubris with which we run our companies. Many organizations are successful in spite of themselves, not because of ourselves. And, I'm as guilty as the next business owner for that. We end up in a wave, a market area that works, and the planets are in alignment, and we ride the wave and we think it's all us. Well, in reality, that's part of the truth, but we can also make it better. So I think that what we really need to do is to make sure that we look and listen, that we have this 360 awareness, and that when I advise rookie project managers, there's no better place in an organization to climb the corporate ladder than having the guts to stand up and speak up. Now, granted, you need to be right, and you need to deliver results. But if you can find a little project, if you can find a little opportunity to literally advocate for, to fight for the resources, to make the case, to make the business case, it's got to be results oriented for the business as a whole, not for the department, but for the business as a whole. We have to be looking at things from this holistic attitude of what will help our business, our organization succeed at its mission. And if we have that worldly, that wide point of view, and then bring to bear the powers of project management, this is a terrific opportunity for entrants into the workforce, folks in their 20s and 30s and 40s, literally, to move high, far, and fast.
We're moving on to the next superpower point, which is this. The key to success with challenging projects lies in the ability to bring people together with clarity, action, purpose, and enthusiasm.
And, we're echoing back to my CAPE theme here, but a unified effort when people create a good team. If you look at teams of any type, whether you're in the military or in a business organization, there's high levels of mutual trust and respect. There's good knowledge of what each other knows. There's good levels of communication. So it's all very personal. It's a very human business that we're in when we lead projects. No matter how much technology is involved, it's still a very human process.
Superpower point number 6 is right-size your plan based on project size, complexity, and risk. And here, I'd like you sort of to develop this a little bit more for us, and especially, how do you define right-size your plan based on project size, complexity, and risk? What's right?
Well, actually, Cornelius, I use the Goldilocks approach. Not too hot, not too cool, but just right. And that's always a judgment call.
Yeah.
But here's what I don't want to have happen. I don't want someone to have a methodology in place that drives their thinking. I want project leaders to look at the results, look at the mission, look at the environment that they're in, and then choose to use the process, if you will, the methodologies that are most appropriate to deliver results. So I don't want us to be in a straitjacket of norms and conditions and forms and checklists. That said, I have some fundamentals that I don't leave home without, but I see too often that there's a sense that another checklist or another form will keep us out of trouble. And I think it's a false sense of security. So right means to me, a project methodology needs to be scalable. So we ask the right questions, and then we move forward delivering results as soon as possible. If we ask the right questions and we need a more sophisticated plan, if we need to go to the next level of planning, the next level of detail, the next level of communication ability, then we'll know it if we ask the right questions. And so I like to think of planning the project as one of a couple of stages, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later.
All right. So we got 2 more of the superpower points to go. And number 7 is to reduce risk and improve agility, negotiate flexibility in the triple constraints. Only the triple constraints? What about the other ones that we have, the other constraints?
Well, when I use the thinking of the triple constraints, I think of the primary strategic constraints.
Right, the top 3. Okay.
At the top 3. And I'm thinking about what's the quality or how good, right? What's the timeline we have to work with? And how many resources can we bring to bear? And I think of those 3 like the physics of fire, that if one of them's missing, you got a mess on your hands. And as we all know in the triple constraints, one of the reasons they're so important for a strategic view of a project is that if somebody wants it really fast, it may not be really cheap. If somebody wants it really cheap, it may affect the quality. So these are connected at the hip. And so they have to be balanced. And when a project is in balance, that's good. But if you have just enough time, just enough resources to achieve the results that you promised, you're probably in trouble. Because we're not allowing for that which might happen, will likely happen, even though we don't know what it is that might happen. So I've never seen a perfect project. So I want a little bit of flexibility in my timeline and or a little bit of flexibility in my resources, even though I don't know exactly where I'm going to need them, and or a little bit of flexibility in my deliverables. And if I have some flexibility in any of those, then I'm more capable and able of managing risk and adapting when that evil villain sticks its head into our project.
All right. The final superpower point is to finish faster, start a little slower. And as you walk us through that, I would appreciate it if you maybe had an example for us where you can illustrate how this would work. So to finish faster, start a little slower.
I think all of us need a process, a project management thinking process, because I think that as a leader, we need to ask the right questions, listen to the right experts, and lead learning. And so in order to do that, I use what many of us use, which is a stage-gated process model. And mine starts like many others. It's not so unusual. And in the project management body of knowledge, many of us use a stage-gated approach to process control. So I want everyone to have a process that serves their purposes. Mine is very fundamental, very scalable. So my process model includes, if you will, the pre-concept checklist. Do we really want to invest any energy in thinking about this project? And then I get into the more usual pieces that you'll see in most project manager thinking, the initiation area of work, the planning area of work, the execution, the control, and the closing. So, the basic 5 pieces that will form up a life cycle in its most cut down form, in its most lean form. And then what I like to do is make sure that we spend adequate time in that initiation and planning phase. And I like to build a reason for people to spend more time initiating and spend more time planning with this little story. Have you ever seen a vampire project? So let me describe what a vampire project is.
Something that sucks.
It does. That's a project you thought was close to being done, but you can't quite get finished. And as long as a vampire project's alive, it sucks the life out of everybody on the team. So if you've ever seen a vampire project that 95% done can't quite get it done, and you ask yourself, what can I do about it? Well, late in the project lifecycle, there's very little choice left. You already begged for more time. You've already pushed the deliverables down as low as you could. You've already made every excuse in the book. Your grandmother has died twice already. There's just nothing left. So a vampire project, there's very little choice. Now, oddly enough, late stage in a project, our understanding is as refined as it will ever be. I mean, our knowledge now about that project and the environment we're working in is wonderful. Now, go back to day one. Day one, we've got all the choices. We've got all the methodologies. If there are any options, they're here now. It's 100% of the options that are available on day one. However, our knowledge is close to zero. So there's a conundrum in projects. When we have the opportunity to make appropriate choices, we have very little knowledge. On the other end of the scale, when we have all the knowledge, our choices have all eroded. So a process that's appropriate helps us move through a project in a measured pace so that we don't, if you will, outdrive our headlights at night. We don't go too fast in the dark. So we move forward as quickly as we can see down the road, and we make sure that we get the questions asked and answered before we move into the next phase. So when I say that to finish faster, we need to start a little slower, what I'm trying to encourage people to do is to spend more time asking the right questions during initiation and then validating what we think we know with a realistic plan that validates what we think we discovered in initiation. So we model what we think we know. And then when we have those in balance and we think we can successfully succeed, then and only then do I recommend jumping into the project, because gravity takes over as soon as we begin execution. And it's just hard. It's hard to argue with gravity. Projects get on a way and they just start rolling, and you roll towards success or you roll towards disaster. So getting it started right is extremely important.
Excellent. Those were the 12 superpower points from Chapter 1, Everyday Superpowers, and Chapter 2, Even Superheroes Need a Plan, that we wanted to get through in this interview. So my final question for you right now is a little bit more generic. How do I go from project manager to project leader?
I think the first thing that we need to do is master the body of knowledge of project management. Know what tools and methodologies and techniques are available, and get that in our toolbox. So that's the first step. Then moving on from there, because this is a mastery level, right, is I think then we need to think through and ask ourselves, how can I use these tools to literally engage the wisdom of my team, whether they report to me or not? How can I use these tools to harvest the wisdom around me? So it becomes a question. The answer of your question becomes a question for each of us to ask, because all of us are in different situations. But how can I work with what I have to engage the purposeful intention of my colleagues? Now, that requires a couple things. One is to think that your team is worthy. Most of us do. Most of us realize that. And most of us believe in our heart of hearts that everybody has something to contribute. And when we walk into it with that enthusiastic attitude, people get it. They get that we appreciate their point of view. They get that we respect and honor their opinions. And very frequently, they will step up. When they know that you are receptive to their point of view, they'll step up. And that, I believe, is really what leadership is all about.
Thank you very much. Once again, the book is called Leadership, the Everyday Superhero's Action Guide to Plan and Deliver High-Stakes Projects. It is written by Ron Black and published by the Mentor Group. And of course, it is available in most fine online bookstores. Ron, thank you so much for your time today and the super PowerPoints.
It's been an honor to serve, and I hope that all your listeners trust their capes.
And that was our leadership interview with Ron Black. As promised at the start, we are giving away 10 copies of his book to you, our listeners. If you have a paid subscription to our premium podcast, then you don't have to do anything. You are automatically entered into the giveaway. Everyone else, please go to facebook.com/pmpodcast, look for the book giveaway announcement, and simply follow the instructions. We will close the Facebook giveaway about 3 weeks after we first publish the interview that you have just heard. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. If you ever feel lonely and left alone on your projects, and you think that nobody cares for you or appreciates the work that you do, then why don't you try missing a few deadlines and bask in the attention you will immediately get? Until next time.